I know you want to talk about GPs' contracts, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But first, we have to reflect on Keir Starmer's visit to see Donald Trump. How do you think it went? Was it better than expected?
Yeah, well, as well as delivering at home, as we'll talk about shortly on the NHS, this is a Prime Minister who's delivering abroad. Yesterday's meeting was absolutely crucial for the UK's national interest, for Ukraine, and for the collective defence and security of Europe. And what you saw yesterday was the Prime Minister deliver what he said he would, which was taking the special relationship between the UK and the US from strength to strength. And I think people saw yesterday the strength of the personal relationship he's built with President Trump, which is absolutely crucial because this is an alliance, a bilateral relationship, which is the bedrock of Britain's national security and our economic security. And on both fronts, we saw really encouraging signs of progress and a determination between these two world leaders to work together to deliver in our shared interest.
And no doubt there were plenty of warm words from President Trump. However, Keir Starmer was going out there partly to seek guarantees, security guarantees for Ukraine. That was supposed to be a priority. Donald Trump, however, did say that the US doesn't need to provide military cover for any European peacekeeping mission, and he repeatedly refused to commit to one. So that's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation, but I think there's a few things we can take heart and confidence in. Firstly, President Trump has changed the conversation on Ukraine to one about how we end the war and win the peace, and that is important progress in the right direction. And there might finally be an end to this brutal war caused by Russian aggression. Secondly, President Zelensky is meeting President Trump today to try and deepen the relationship between the US and Ukraine in a way that will benefit both countries and also act as a deterrent to Russia taking liberties with Ukrainian defence and security in the future. So I think that's encouraging too. And the third thing is President Trump has been very clear about his commitment and the US's historic commitment to our collective defence and security through NATO, the central importance of the bilateral relationship with the UK. Those are all grounds for real optimism that we might end this war and win the peace.
OK, you talk about President Zelensky's trip today to Washington. He's going to sign this minerals deal. And President Trump has said that that would be enough to deter further attacks by President Putin, the fact that there are Americans working on the ground in Ukraine. Do you think that's enough? I mean, how would the UK feel about committing troops to Ukraine without an explicit US military backstop? Would they be in harm's way at all, do you think, without that?
Well, I think there are two things here. I mean, one is that I think President Trump is right about the US's interests and presence in Ukraine acting as a deterrent. And secondly, the United States has always, since NATO was founded, it has always been the backstop as well as the bedrock of European defence and security for Britain and for the continent as well, because of the shared commitments that we have through the NATO alliance. So I think those are all grounds for optimism. I think that the Prime Minister has delivered exactly what not just Britain needed him to, but our friends in Ukraine and across Europe needed him to deliver, and showed that this relationship between our two countries and these two men is going to be absolutely critical in Britain's national interest and in the West's and the democratic world's collective interest as well.
But doesn't he need more than the minerals deal on the issue of security from the US?
Well, as I say, this is a fast-moving situation, and we've been clear throughout we will back Ukraine to the hilt, and there can be no decision about Ukraine without Ukraine. That's why President Zelensky's visit today is going to be particularly important. But I think we've seen real signs of progress in recent weeks, and I think what the President of the United States has been telling us for some time, including between his two administrations, is that he expects Europe to pull its socks up and pull its weight when it comes to European defence and security. We agree with him on that, and that's why this week the Prime Minister and the Cabinet took the tough but necessary decision to prioritise our national defence over international development. Not an easy choice, but the right choice, and one I think most people in this country would expect us to take, of putting Britain's defence and security at the top of our agenda, because it's the first responsibility of any government.
OK, another thing that a lot of people care about is tariffs, and there were some encouraging noises on the issues of that. In fact, President Trump said that a real trade deal could happen very quickly, and that would be a deal that would mean that you wouldn't need any tariffs. So that's good news. But in the past, talks about trade deals have always floundered on issues like chlorinated chicken, but also about US access to the NHS. Are you prepared to give ground in order to secure a trade deal with the US?
Well, the NHS is not up for grabs and is not on the table in the context of trade, but there are a number of areas where we can and should work together to deepen the trading relationship between our two countries. And so yesterday I had two reactions to the evident enthusiasm that you saw from President Trump for a deeper trade relationship with the UK, which is something the UK government wants to see as well. Firstly, I was really excited by it. But secondly, I also know, and my friend the Business and Trade Secretary was keen to remind me and colleagues last night that the warmth and enthusiasm is the bit to get the ball rolling, but the hard yards are still ahead. And as we know about President Trump, he is a hard-headed businessman and he's not a pushover. And as we heard from President Trump, so don't take my word for it, as a loyal cabinet minister, our Prime Minister is a tough negotiator as well. So the hard yards on this are ahead, but we do want to make progress. We want to do that quickly. We genuinely think there's a lot in it for both the UK and the US and our collective economic security.
So taking nothing for granted, and also how is it, do you think, dealing with someone like President Trump? I mean, we heard that moment in the news conference when, having caused consternation by calling President Zelensky a dictator, he then said in the news conference, did I say that? I can't believe I said that. What do you think that says about him? I
think it says two things about President Trump that I've observed watching my colleagues, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, and working with this US administration up close. I think there are two observations I would make. Firstly, you give respect and you get respect in return, and that's the way in which this president operates. If you show him respect, he shows respect in return. And the second thing I'd say is that President Trump is someone that needs to be judged on what he does, not simply on what he says. And if I think about what he said in the past about NATO and European defence, for example, he did it in a characteristically robust way. But the fundamental point he was making about Europe, including the UK, having to pay our way and pay our fair share for our continent's own security was actually a fair challenge. He put it in his characteristically robust way. He'll kind of slam his position down on the table to grab people's attention and show he's serious, but then he'll work with people through the issue. So, I took real heart from what we saw in Washington yesterday, but it's the culmination of a huge amount of work that's taken place in the run-up to that meeting. And the Prime Minister has been working with President Trump directly, and the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, the whole international team working collectively during the US presidential election to build those relationships before the inauguration and since, because we knew that it was our responsibility to deliver in our national interest working with this US administration. So lots to be excited about. I'm going to speed you on because otherwise we won't have time to talk about GP reforms. And you're announcing today that GPs have accepted new contract arrangements. That means cutting red tape. It means giving people the ability to book appointments online, doesn't it? And there's a bit more money as well. And the BMA have said it's a good start, but they also say it doesn't go far enough. Do you accept that you've got more work to do? So as well as delivering for our country abroad, the Prime Minister is also delivering at home. This is the first deal that we've agreed with GPs as government since the pandemic. It's ended the dispute and the collective action that GPs have been taking. And it's going to deliver not just for GPs, but most importantly for patients, modernising the way that people can book appointments so people get access to online services in the way that we can access other services in our lives, bringing back the family-doctor relationship, incentivising GPs so that the patients see the same GP on repeat visits for either an ongoing condition or multiple conditions. That's really going to be important as well. We're also slashing the red tape that ties GPs up. We've almost halved the number of measures and bureaucracy that GPs have to undertake. So does it solve all of the problems that have built up over the last 14 years in one contract and one budget? Of course it doesn't. But I hope it gives people at home watching that encouragement that this government is walking the talk, delivering on our promises, delivering change, and of course it takes time. So I'm not here today to say, I've sorted it all out in less than a year. A lot done, a hell of a lot more to do. But I hope whether it was the Prime Minister's visit to Washington yesterday or the announcement on GPs today, the fact that we will have 1,000 GPs on the front line by the end of March, and you can come back and see if I've delivered the promise next month, bringing down waiting lists 4 months in a row, I mean, there's a hell of a lot more to do, but we are delivering the change we promised. And I hope that starts to rebuild people's trust and confidence that politics can deliver, and this government is delivering the change we promised.
OK, we are out of time. Wes Streeting, good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.